The Heian period is one of the most important and refined eras in Japanese history, lasting from 794 CE to 1185 CE. It began when Emperor Kanmu moved the capital from Nara to Heian-kyō, which is known today as Kyoto. This move marked the start of a new age focused on peace, culture, and courtly elegance. During this period, Japan developed its own unique identity, separate from strong Chinese influence. The ruling class, especially the aristocrats of the imperial court, placed great importance on art, literature, poetry, beauty, and emotions. Life at court was governed by strict rules of etiquette, appearance, and behavior. Although the emperor was considered sacred, real political power gradually shifted to noble families, particularly the Fujiwara clan, who controlled the government through marriage and influence. While the capital enjoyed luxury and refinement, the provinces were slowly becoming dominated by warrior families, which would later change Japan's political system. The Heian period is remembered as Japan's cultural golden age, producing timeless literary masterpieces like the Tale of Genji and shaping Japanese aesthetics, traditions, and values that continue to influence Japan today. The Heian period officially began in 794 CE when Emperor Kanmu moved Japan's capital to Heian-kyō, ending the Nara period. This decision was made to reduce the political influence of powerful Buddhist monasteries and to establish a more stable and independent center of government. Heian-kyō, present-day Kyoto, was carefully planned following Chinese geomantic principles feng shui. The city was laid out in a grid pattern with the imperial palace located in the northern part of the city, symbolizing authority and order. For nearly 4 centuries, Heian-kyō remained the heart of Japanese political, cultural, and artistic life. The Heian period lasted until 1185 CE, making it one of the longest periods in Japanese history. During this time, Japan experienced long phases of peace at the capital, allowing court culture, literature, and aesthetics to flourish. However, while the court enjoyed stability, regional warrior clans gradually gained power in the provinces. The period came to an end after the Genpei War, 1180–1185, between the Taira and Minamoto clans. The victory of the Minamoto clan led to the establishment of the Kamakura shogunate, marking a shift from aristocratic rule to samurai-led governance. Despite its political decline, Heian-kyō continued to serve as Japan's cultural and spiritual center for centuries. The political system of the Heian period was centered on the imperial court in Heian-kyō, but actual power rarely rested with the emperor. Although the emperor was considered a divine and sacred figure, day-to-day governance was controlled by aristocratic families, especially the Fujiwara clan. The government followed a system based on the Ritsuryo Code, which had been adapted from Chinese administrative models. In theory, this system placed the emperor at the top, supported by ministers and officials. In practice, however, many government positions became hereditary, weakening the authority of the central state. The Fujiwara family dominated politics by marrying their daughters into the imperial family. They ruled as regents, sessho for child emperors, and chief advisors, kampaku for adult emperors. Through these roles, the Fujiwara controlled court decisions, land distribution, and high-ranking appointments. Over time, the court government became increasingly detached from rural provinces. Local administration weakened, tax collection declined, and large private estates called shun emerged. These estates were exempt from taxes and government control, allowing regional warrior families to gain military and economic power. As aristocratic politics grew ineffective, the samurai class rose in influence, eventually replacing court nobles as Japan's ruling force. This shift laid the foundation for the military government shogunate that would follow the Heian period. During the Heian period, the emperor was considered divine, believed to be a descendant of the sun goddess Amaterasu. This gave the emperor spiritual authority, but political power was limited. Most emperors acted as symbolic rulers, performing religious and ceremonial duties rather than managing day-to-day governance. The Fujiwara clan became the most powerful family in Heian Japan. They controlled the government by marrying their daughters into the imperial family, ensuring that future emperors were their grandchildren. Through this strategy, the Fujiwara often served as sessho, regent for a child emperor; kampaku, chief advisor for an adult emperor; This system allowed the Fujiwara to dominate political decisions, control appointments to important positions, and influence policies without holding the throne directly. While the emperor maintained prestige and spiritual authority, the Fujiwara effectively ran the court, creating a system where appearances of power were separated from actual governance. Over time, this dominance led to weakening central government control in the provinces, emergence of private estates Shun, gradual rise of the samurai class. In essence, the Heian emperor was a figurehead, while the Fujiwara clan was the real power behind the throne, shaping politics and culture for centuries. During the Heian period, the life of the aristocracy revolved around elegance, beauty, and refinement. Nobles in the imperial court followed strict rules of behavior and etiquette. Every action, every gesture, and even the way they walked was a reflection of their status and taste. The court placed immense value on artistic skills, and cultural knowledge. Poetry, painting, music, and calligraphy were considered essential accomplishments, and daily life often involved composing poems, painting scrolls, and practicing music. Instruments. The nobility took part in seasonal celebrations and ceremonies, where grace and style were judged as much as talent. Leisure activities included arranging flowers, composing elegant letters, and participating in tea rituals, which emphasized harmony and mindfulness. The attire of the aristocrats was elaborate and meaningful. Women wore layered silk robes called junyato and carefully chosen color combinations that represented rank, season, and occasion. Their hair was long and flowing, sometimes reaching the floor, and cosmetics were used subtly to highlight facial features. Men wore formal robes and traditional caps to indicate office and social position. Clothing and appearance were considered a form of communication expressing refinement, status, and taste. The court also placed importance on etiquette and protocol. Nobles learned from childhood how to speak right and move gracefully, and breaches of decorum could affect reputation and influence. The Heian aristocracy lived in a world where aesthetic sensitivity was central, and where cultural accomplishment defined power and prestige. Their lives were devoted to the pursuit of beauty, art, and harmony, which created a golden age of Japanese culture that still inspires admiration today. During the Heian period, clothing and fashion were one of the most important indicators of social status and taste. Nobles spent a great deal of time choosing their robes and coordinating colors to reflect the season, their rank, and the occasion. Women wore elaborate layered silk robes known as junyato, which could consist of up to 12 layers. The robes were carefully arranged so that the inner colors peeked out at the sleeves and hems, creating a harmonious and aesthetically pleasing combination. The choice of color was symbolic and often inspired by nature, the seasons, or poetry. Hair was long, flowing, and considered a symbol of beauty and refinement. Women also applied subtle makeup, including white facial powder and blackened teeth, to enhance their appearance. Men wore formal court robes called sokutai, which included caps and ceremonial sashes. The style and patterns of the robes indicated their court rank and political status. Fashion was not only about appearance, but also about demonstrating taste, grace, and cultural knowledge. Etiquette was closely linked with clothing, as certain gestures, movements, and postures were expected. While wearing these robes, the way one walked, sat, or moved through the palace had to be graceful and measured. Following these rules of fashion and etiquette was essential to maintain respect and influence at court, and it contributed to the highly refined and artistic culture that defined the Heian aristocracy. During the Heian period, literature and writing became one of the most important expressions of culture and refinement. The imperial court valued poetry, diaries, essays, and storytelling as essential skills for nobles. Both men and women were expected to compose poetry to demonstrate intelligence, emotion, and aesthetic sensibility. One of the most important developments of this period was the rise of kana writing, a simplified script derived from Chinese characters, which allowed the Japanese language to be written more fluidly and elegantly. Before kana, most writing was done in classical Chinese, which was difficult for women to master. Because of this, women became some of the greatest contributors to Japanese literature, producing works that remain celebrated today. The most famous example is the Tale of Genji, written by Murasaki Shikibu, which is considered the world's first novel. It tells the story of court life, love, politics, and the emotions of the aristocracy in intricate detail. Another famous work is The Pillow Book by Sei Shonagon, a collection of essays, lists, anecdotes, and observations of daily life at court. These writings reveal the importance of refined observation, wit, and sensitivity to beauty. In Heian culture, poetry was also central, and yudowace, or poetry contests, were regularly held, where nobles would compete to compose the most beautiful verses on seasonal themes. Nature, the moon, flowers, and changing seasons were frequent subjects. The act of writing and exchanging poems was a form of social interaction, political maneuvering, and artistic expression. Combined, in addition to literature, writing influenced other arts such as calligraphy, which was considered mark of education, refinement, and social status. Beautifully written scrolls and letters were treasured as objects of art, and often carefully preserved or exchanged as gifts. The emphasis on literature during the Heian period helped shape Japan's literary identity and left a lasting legacy of elegance and sophistication in Japanese culture. The Heian period, some of the most remarkable literary figures in Japanese history, emerged. Their works continue to influence literature and culture even today. Among the most famous writers was Murasaki Shikibu, a noblewoman who served at the imperial court. She is best known for writing the Tale of Genji. Often considered the world's first novel, the work provides a detailed portrayal of court life, love, romance, and the emotions of aristocrats through the story of Prince Genji and his many relationships. The novel is celebrated for its intricate character development, psychological depth, and poetic language. Murasaki Shikibu's writing not only entertained, but also reflected the refined aesthetic values and social norms of the Heian court. Another prominent figure was Sei Shonagon, also a court lady and contemporary of Murasaki Shikibu. She wrote The Pillow Book, a collection of essays, observations, anecdotes, and lists that reveal daily life at court. Her work combines wit, humor, keen observation, and an appreciation of beauty. The Pillow Book gives modern readers insight into the manners, fashion, literary practices, and social dynamics of the Heian aristocracy. Other writers included Fujiwara no Taika, a master of poetry, who helped develop and compile important poetry anthologies and codified poetic standards. His contributions shaped Japanese waka poetry for centuries. Court poetry contests called yudo-wace were popular, and poets were judged on creativity, elegance, and seasonal sensitivity. Heian writers emphasized the aesthetic principle of miyabi, which valued refinement, grace, and elegance as essential qualities. In writing, their works often focused on love, nature, seasonal change, and emotional subtlety. Women played a particularly important role in literature because of the development of kana script, which allowed them to write fluently in Japanese while men often wrote in classical Chinese. The literature of the Heian period was not only artistic, but also social and political. Poetry and stories were used to convey feelings, communicate between lovers, demonstrate education, and navigate courtly life. Nobles exchanged poems to show wit and skill, and literary ability often influenced one's reputation and standing at court. Overall, the writers of the Heian period captured the sensitivity, elegance, and complexity of aristocratic life. Their works preserved the ideals, aesthetics, and emotions of the era, creating a lasting legacy that continues to define classical Japanese culture. During the Heian period, art and calligraphy were considered essential expressions of refinement and cultural sophistication. The aristocracy believed that beauty and elegance should permeate every aspect of life, including visual arts, decorative objects, and written text. One of the most distinctive art forms of the period was Yamato-e, a painting style that depicted Japanese landscapes, seasonal changes, court life, and historical or literary scenes. Unlike earlier Chinese-inspired paintings, Yamato-e emphasized bright colors, flowing lines, and intricate detail. These paintings often appeared on folding screens, scrolls, and sliding doors, and were valued for their aesthetic appeal as well as their storytelling. Calligraphy was equally important, and seen as a reflection of education, taste, and social status. Nobles practiced writing with brushes and ink on paper or silk, and the style of one's brushstrokes indicated refinement and personality. Beautifully written scrolls and letters were treasured as works of art, and frequently exchanged as gifts or preserved in private collections. Calligraphy and painting were closely intertwined, and often appeared together in illustrated manuscripts and poetry scrolls. The Heian aristocracy also emphasized aesthetic principles such as miyabi, which valued elegance and refinement, and mono no aware the sensitivity to the beauty and impermanence of life. Nature was a central theme in art, with depictions of cherry blossoms, autumn leaves, moonlit nights, and seasonal festivals appearing frequently. Artists and writers alike sought to capture fleeting emotions and delicate beauty in their work. Decorative objects such as lacquerware, ceramics, textiles, and fans were highly elaborate and designed to complement the aesthetic environment of the palace. Nobles arranged their living spaces carefully to create harmony between art, nature, and architecture. Even mundane items were designed to express taste and elegance. Art in the Heian period was not merely decorative but a reflection of social status, personal refinement, and cultural identity. The combination of painting, calligraphy, poetry, and aesthetic sensibility created a sophisticated cultural environment that defined the aristocracy and left a lasting legacy in Japanese artistic traditions. During the Heian period, religion played a central role in both public and private life, and deeply influenced culture, art, and politics. Buddhism and Shinto coexisted with overlapping practices and beliefs. The imperial court officially supported Buddhism and constructed grand temples, while Shinto rituals continued to honor the kami, or spirits of nature and ancestors. Buddhism became particularly influential in Heian Japan as new sects like Tendai and Shingon introduced elaborate rituals, esoteric teachings, In artistic practices, court nobles often sponsored temples and participated in ceremonies both to gain spiritual merit and to display wealth and status. Buddhist temples were centers of learning, art, and culture, producing paintings, statues, architecture, and religious texts. The imagery of Buddha and bodhisattvas influenced Yamato-e paintings and inspired literary themes in poetry and prose. Shinto remained an important part of daily life and festivals, emphasizing harmony with nature and the worship of local spirits. Many rituals marked seasonal changes, agricultural cycles, and family life. The blending of Buddhism and Shinto created a syncretic religious environment where ceremonies and beliefs complemented each other rather than conflicted. Religious devotion in the Heian period was not only spiritual but also political. Nobles used temple patronage to assert influence while maintaining social prestige. Pilgrimages to sacred sites, the commissioning of statues, and the construction of pagodas were common practices that displayed piety and power simultaneously. During the Heian period, education was an essential part of aristocratic life and was closely linked to court culture and refinement. Both men and women of the nobility were expected to be educated in literature, poetry, music, calligraphy, and court etiquette. Learning was not just practical but a measure of social status, intelligence, and aesthetic taste. Boys from noble families studied Chinese classics, Buddhist texts, history, and governmental procedures to prepare for official positions in the imperial court. Education for girls focused on Japanese literature, poetry, calligraphy, and social refinement, so they could participate in court life and write elegant letters and diaries. Private tutors and court instructors provided lessons in palaces and noble residences. The ability to compose poetry fluently, observe seasonal beauty, and write elegantly in kana script was highly prized. Students also learned music and dance, which were integral to festivals and court ceremonies. Education extended to understanding court politics, alliances, and etiquette, because knowledge of these subjects could influence one's position and reputation. Poetry contests, literary salons, and reading circles were common forms of social and intellectual engagement. These gatherings allowed nobles to display their learning, wit, and creativity, and helped maintain cultural standards at court. Calligraphy was also taught rigorously because the beauty of one's writing reflected personal refinement. Education in the Heian period was therefore not only about knowledge, but about cultivating taste, elegance, and moral propriety. It prepared aristocrats to navigate court life, participate in cultural practices, and preserve the aesthetic and literary values that defined the era. The combination of intellectual, artistic, and social education created a sophisticated environment in which culture, refinement, and etiquette flourished. During the Heian period, women played a central and influential role in aristocratic life and culture. Unlike in many other contemporary societies, Heian women had opportunities to participate actively in court life and leave a lasting impact through literature, art, and social influence. They were educated in poetry, calligraphy, music, dance, and the proper etiquette needed to navigate the intricate social structures of the court. Women's literacy and skill in writing kana script allowed them to compose diaries, novels, letters, and poetry that captured the subtleties of daily life, personal emotion, and courtly relationships. Noblemen were often key figures in shaping aesthetic values and social norms. Their writings, such as the Pillow Book by Sei Shunnagun and the Tale of Genji by Murasaki Shukaba, provide detailed insights into court politics, fashion, romance, and seasonal customs. Women also influenced alliances and status through marriage arrangements, family connections, and participation in ceremonial life. Court ladies wore elaborate layered silk robes called junata, long flowing hair, and subtle cosmetics which symbolized refinement, elegance, and social rank. Their presence at ceremonies, poetry gatherings, and cultural events was both socially significant and culturally influential. Women acted as patrons of art, contributors to literary salons, and preservers of aesthetic ideals such as maiba, refinement, and mono no aware, sensitivity to life's impermanence. Despite limitations in political authority, women of the Heian court exercised power through cultural expression, social intelligence, and literary talent. Their contributions helped define the golden age of Heian culture, leaving a legacy of literature, art, and aesthetics that continues to influence Japanese culture centuries later. During the Heian period, the daily life of the nobility was highly structured, refined, and centered around aesthetics. In courtly culture, nobles lived in spacious wooden palaces, with sliding screens, tatami floors, and beautifully arranged gardens. Their days were filled with a combination of ceremonial duties, artistic pursuits, social interactions, and leisurely activities. The morning often began with rituals or prayers, followed by reading or composing poetry and attending to correspondence. Nobles spent considerable time writing letters and exchanging poems, which allowed them to express emotions, demonstrate intelligence, and maintain social connections. Meals were elaborate and often served in small, beautifully arranged dishes, emphasizing seasonal ingredients and presentation. Food was accompanied by quiet conversation and appreciation of the aesthetic environment around them. Clothing and appearance were carefully maintained throughout the day. Men and women wore formal robes appropriate to the occasion, and spent time arranging hair, cosmetics, and accessories to reflect rank and fashion. Social gatherings were common and could include poetry contests, music and dance performances, and literary salons. Nobles also engaged in outdoor leisure such as strolling through gardens, appreciating cherry blossoms, observing the changing seasons, or boating along rivers. Leisure was never idle, but an opportunity to demonstrate taste, refinement, and aesthetic sensitivity. Ceremonial occasions were integral to daily life and included seasonal festivals, religious observances, and court functions. Attendance at these events allowed nobles to display social status, network with other families, and engage in cultural performances. Although the daily life of the Han aristocracy was luxurious and cultured, it was also governed by strict rules of etiquette and behavior. Every action, from sitting to speaking to walking, was carefully controlled to reflect grace, refinement, and social awareness. The combination of art, literature, leisure, and ceremony created a lifestyle in which beauty and cultural accomplishment were the central measure of value and prestige, defining the golden age of the Han court. During the Han period, architecture and palaces reflected the elegance, sophistication, and aesthetic sensibilities of the aristocracy. The residences of nobles and the imperial palace were designed to harmonize with nature, while demonstrating wealth and status. Palaces were constructed mainly of wood with sliding screens, tatami floors, and open verandas which allowed light and air to flow freely. The layout was often arranged around courtyards and gardens, creating a seamless connection between indoor and outdoor spaces. The imperial palace in Heian-kyō was the center of political power and court life. It included audience halls, private chambers, gardens, ceremonial spaces, and administrative offices. The arrangement of buildings and rooms followed both practical considerations and symbolic principles, reflecting rank, function, and hierarchy. Decorative elements such as painted screens, lacquered furniture, and intricately carved wooden beams were common, showcasing artistic skill and refinement. Noble residences were smaller, but followed similar principles. They often featured multiple rooms connected by corridors, sliding doors decorated with painted scenes, and gardens designed for contemplation or seasonal enjoyment. Seasonal changes were celebrated through architecture, with verandas and windows positioned to frame cherry blossoms, autumn leaves, and moonlit nights. The concept of ma, or harmonious spatial intervals, was central to design, creating a sense of balance and serenity. Architecture also served cultural and social functions. The palace and noble homes were spaces for poetry gatherings, ceremonies, music and dance performances, and socializing. The design facilitated aesthetic appreciation and cultural expression, making architecture itself a form of art. Overall, Heian architecture combined functionality, aesthetic beauty, and cultural symbolism, creating living spaces that were not only comfortable, but also deeply expressive of the values and refinement of the aristocracy. The style influenced Japanese architectural traditions for centuries and remains an iconic symbol of the era. During the Heian period, festivals and entertainment were central to court life and cultural expression. The aristocracy organized and participated in a wide variety of events that celebrated seasonal changes, religious observances, and aesthetic pursuits. Seasonal festivals such as Hanami, the viewing of cherry blossoms, and moon viewing ceremonies were occasions for nobles to gather outdoors, compose poetry, and perform music. The appreciation of nature, coupled with artistic performance, was an essential part of social life. Entertainment included poetry contests known as yudowace, musical performances featuring instruments like the koto and biwa, and traditional dances performed in the palace or private gardens. Nobles also enjoyed storytelling, reading of literary works, and elegant games that tested wit and knowledge. These activities provided opportunities to display cultural refinement, intelligence, and social grace. Ceremonies often combined religious, cultural, and social elements for a holistic experience. For example, festivals linked to Shinto or Buddhist rituals involved offerings, prayers, performances, and gatherings of nobles in ornate settings. The events were carefully choreographed and reflected the values of harmony, elegance, and aesthetic sensitivity. Court entertainments also served political and social purposes. Participation in festivals and cultural activities allowed nobles to strengthen alliances, demonstrate status, and gain favor with influential families. Observing proper etiquette, displaying artistic skill, and engaging in conversation were essential components of these gatherings. Overall, festivals and entertainment in the Heian period were not mere leisure but a sophisticated blend of art, social interaction, and cultural expression. They reinforced the aesthetic ideals of the aristocracy, fostered social cohesion, and provided a platform for intellectual and artistic excellence. making them an indispensable aspect of Heian court life. During the Heian period, literature and poetry were central to aristocratic culture, and daily life poetry was not only an artistic expression, but also a social and political tool. Nobles were expected to be skilled in waka, a form of 31-syllable poetry, and their ability to compose elegant verses reflected intelligence, refinement, and emotional sensitivity. Poetry was used to communicate feelings, convey wit, participate in contests, and even influence courtly relationships. Waka often focused on themes such as love, seasonal changes, nature, and the impermanence of life, reflecting the aesthetic principle of mono no aware. The sensitivity to the fleeting beauty of the world. Court poetry contests called udaways were frequent, with judges evaluating verses based on elegance, creativity, and adherence to form. These contests provided opportunities for nobles to display their literary skill and gain recognition. Many women of the court, including Murasaki Shikabu and Sei Shonagon, contributed greatly to literature through novels, diaries, essays, and poetic collections. Their writings often incorporated waka and described court life, relationships, festivals, and seasonal beauty, providing invaluable insights into Heian culture. Women's literary achievements were made possible by the use of kana script, which allowed more fluid and expressive writing in Japanese rather than classical Chinese. Poetry and literature were also integrated into daily activities and ceremonial events. Nobles composed poems for letters, seasonal celebrations, moon viewing, cherry blossom viewing, and other occasions. The artistry of language, choice of metaphor, and elegance of expression were carefully observed, and success in literary skill could enhance social reputation and influence. Overall, literature and poetry in the Heian period were far more than entertainment. They were a medium for aesthetic refinement, personal expression, social interaction, and political maneuvering. The emphasis on writing, poetry, and literary skill created a sophisticated and cultured environment that defined the golden age of Heian aristocracy. During the Heian period, music and performing arts were central elements of court culture, and daily aristocratic life. Music, dance, and theatrical performances were highly valued as markers of refinement, social status, and cultural sophistication. Court nobles were trained from an early age in playing traditional instruments such as the koto, biwa, sho, and hikariki, as well as performing ceremonial dances. These skills were essential for participation in festivals, poetry gatherings, and private entertainment within the palace. Performances often took place in palace halls, gardens, or verandas overlooking seasonal landscapes. The presentation of music and dance was closely tied to aesthetic principles such as miyabi, emphasizing elegance, grace, and emotional subtlety. Movements, gestures, and musical phrasing were carefully controlled to reflect refinement and social propriety. Court performances could be formal, ritualistic, or celebratory, often integrating poetry, storytelling, and seasonal themes. Noblewomen played important roles as performers, singers, and dancers in both public ceremonies and private gatherings. Music and dance also served as a medium of social interaction, courtship, and cultural display. Participation in these arts allowed nobles to demonstrate skill, taste, and creativity, while success in performance could enhance one's reputation and influence within the court. In addition to entertainment, music and performing arts were intertwined with religious and seasonal festivals. Buddhist and Shinto ceremonies often included musical accompaniment and dance, blending spiritual devotion with artistic expression. These activities reflected the interconnectedness of culture, religion, and social life in Heian Japan. Overall, music and performing arts in the Heian period were not merely for amusement. They were essential components of aristocratic education, cultural expression, social networking, and aesthetic cultivation, helping define the sophistication and elegance of the era. During the Heian period, gardens and nature played a vital role in aristocratic life and culture. The Japanese nobility placed great importance on creating landscapes that reflected beauty, harmony, and seasonal change. Palace gardens were carefully designed with ponds, streams, bridges, flowering trees, and rock arrangements to create a serene and contemplative environment. These gardens were not only decorative, but also spaces for leisure, poetry, and reflection. Seasonal awareness was central to Heian aesthetics. Noblemen and noblewomen appreciated the subtle changes in nature, such as cherry blossoms in spring, iris blooms in early summer, vibrant autumn leaves, and snow-covered scenery in winter. These seasonal features were often framed by palace architecture, verandas, and open corridors, allowing the court to experience nature from multiple perspectives. Gardens also served social and cultural functions. Poetry gatherings, moon viewing ceremonies, and musical performances were often held in gardens, blending human artistry with natural beauty. The layout of the garden emphasized or spatial harmony, creating a sense of balance, proportion, and tranquility. Paths and ponds guided visitors in contemplative movement, while strategically placed trees and rocks highlighted seasonal beauty and aesthetic principles. Nature-inspired motifs were also prevalent in art, textiles, and literature, reflecting the intimate connection between the environment and Heian cultural expression. The appreciation of fleeting beauty, known as mono no aware, permeated the way gardens were designed and experienced, encouraging nobles to savor the impermanence and elegance of life. Overall, gardens and nature were not merely decorative but integral to the cultural, aesthetic, and social fabric of Heian life. They provided spaces for reflection, artistic expression, and celebration, embodying the ideals of refinement, harmony, and seasonal sensitivity that define the golden age of Japanese aristocracy. The Heian period was a golden age of Japanese culture, where literature, art, music, fashion, and courtly elegance flourished. Nobles lived refined lives, celebrating seasonal beauty, composing poetry, and practicing music and dance. The influence of women, gardens, religion, and aesthetic principles like mono no aware shaped a sophisticated society whose legacy still inspires Japan today. If you enjoyed this journey through Heian Japan, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more cultural insights.